This video and the trigger warnings that follow will contain spoilers for the entirety of the Malevolent podcast up to part 56, regardless of the season being discussed. Viewer discretion is advised. Malevolent is a cosmic horror audio drama that contains content some listeners may find disturbing. General disclaimers available on the official Malevolent website read as follows. Cults, bodily possession, panic attacks, Lovecraftian creatures, jump scares, cosmic horror, strong arguments, and guns. For Season 1, I will also depict and discuss monsters, blood and dismemberment, although blurred, children in danger, hallucinations, knife violence, hostile gods, hospitalization, occult rituals, body horror, death in corpses, a car crash, being chased, and suicide. Although the tone of the video will be kept light. For a full list of content warnings, see the Content Warnings tab and season-specific posts, or the official transcripts, all available publicly at malevolent.ca. Also in this video will be spoken and drawn references and spoilers for Divisor, the Magnus Archives, Ultrakill, Usagi Yojimbo, and the Invictus Streams Call of Cthulhu Campaign Game 1. This podcast is rated 18+, not for any sexual content, but for disturbing imagery and swearing. In the comedic spirit of the video and the podcast's rating, I will also be swearing. And finally, I personally do not ship any of the characters out of personal preference. However, I do depict situations and use language that could imply otherwise. I respect the canon as stated by the creator, but I also support the fandom and enjoy their ideas of the show. Malevolent, Divisor, and the Invictus stream were created by Harlan Guthrie. This video, this voice, this art, and this editing were made entirely by me without the use of generative AI, which means you will all just have to suffer my attempts at voice acting. This video wouldn't be possible without all the support from my family and friends, nor would it be enjoyable if it weren't for viewers like you who support the channel. So, thank you, and I hope you enjoy my current fixation.
I can't forget.
Where am I? What's happened?
Don't you remember?
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm a friend. And you call it madness. Ah, but I call it love.
I can't recommend Malevolent to anyone who wants to live a normal life, especially since I myself don't remember how I found it. Now that's not entirely true. I do remember finding it and thinking I should listen to it, but I can't for the life of me remember where exactly I got it from. By that I just mean it wasn't advertised to me and no one told me about it. I had to look it up by myself because I didn't know it, but I knew it somehow. The current builders of my personality are no longer Twilight Sparkle from hit game Twilight Sparkle, but are instead the most unfortunate man you've ever met and his seeing eye elder god of madness. And as a little bonus, I've started memorizing poetry again. I can think of Charlie every waking second, and I can play piano now. Peek this sick organ solo machine. I've also convinced Hugo's mom to watch it with me, convinced my best friend to start listening to it, and tell everything about it to my sister during our nightly infodump sessions. This is the portion of the video where I get into some spoilers, so if you have not listened, stop right now. Please, I'm begging you on my knees, go listen to it. It's so good, please. It's not even that long. It's long, but it's not even that long. You know how the Magnus Archives took like 2 seasons of build-up before you realized the characters were actually involved in their own story? Not dissing the Magnus Archives, I've almost listened to the whole thing. It's just different. It's just different. Harlan's not playing that game. Arthur Lester, private detective, wakes up one day with a voice in his head after supposedly opening a big scary book, which is something you should never do in a Lovecraft story. Now he can't see and has a voice in his head telling him what he sees, and he can't decide which one of those is more terrifying until he trips over the body of his partner, Parker. Parker! Parker. The entity in his head, who will soon be named John, is equally frustrated about their predicament because the incantation he had Arthur read was supposed to give him control of the body, and has not. After another accidental on-purpose murder, they quickly realize to their chagrin that they have to work together if they're going to escape the cops, along with figuring out where exactly the voice came from and how they're going to separate them. Unfortunately, that how they're going to separate goal is quickly pushed to the wayside because of the sheer amount of monsters that are after them. And through their journey, it's Arthur's job to decide if the voice in his head is truly malevolent. Roll credits. And the answer is he's trying his best. But that's not going to stop them from literally fighting God. And you know I can't resist a good story about people fighting God. Oh my god, he's so cool. Arthur Lester successfully made me a barbarian main. Think intelligence casters are actually cool. Anyway, if that's your thing and you ignored the spoiler portion, still listen to it, because the rest of this video slash series will be dedicated to the real spoilers. From the moment I started Malevolent, I've been drawing in my sketchbooks as I listen to the episodes, so most of my sketchbook is full of Arthur and John. And I find it very interesting how I impulsively designed them based on what was happening in the episode. So in dedication to the podcast, the awesome fandom, the awesome creator, and my own fixation, I will be doing a series where I design Arthur based on how I drew him in my sketchbooks and how I think he changed over the course of the series. Because he changed drastically in my mind, and I really enjoy that progression, and I'd like to refine it. There are obviously still going to be huge spoiler warnings, but I will not be going over every single individual plot point, unless it relates back to the design that I'm doing. In short, this video is a yap session where I force you to look at my super cool drawings. Roll the tape.
Out of the night that covers me. Black is the pit, from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul.
Interestingly, Season 1 might have Art and John going through the most design changes, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I blasted through this season and Season 2 so fast, I literally didn't have time to draw hardly anything. In fact, I think throughout all of Season 1, I was either doing dumb little doodles in my sketchbook of myself reacting to the episodes, or I was working on a big digital piece, and that took me up until the end of Season 2, as evidenced by the addition of the neck incident on Arthur. So most of the more quote-unquote serious design work will be discussed in Season 3, but I will quickly tell you about the content of Season 1 and Season 2, obviously, and then how I began with drawing everyone here. When it comes to things I'm used to drawing, John was right up my alley, because I am a shadowy creatures with pallid masks expert. The only thing special I did was cut the mask in half, because I thought it would be, you know, haha funny, he's half of the king in yellow. Arthur was the beginning of my real problems. You see, my friends, my last fixation was Ultra Kill. And before that, D&D, Lackadaisy, the Magnus Archives, Old Gods of Appalachia, Night Vale, Troll Hunters, Lego Monkey Kids, Sonic, Usagi Yojimbo, Ninja Turtles, Hell of a Boss, and finally Has-Been Hotel. It's been that long since I've drawn anything slightly human, and that was before the pandemic. So, what I'm trying to say is, I'm not a big fan of just normal, boring human characters. Well, I wasn't a big fan of normal, boring human characters, but goddammit, Harlan Guthrie. Oh, he's really done it now. Funny, the very first thing I did when trying to figure out how to draw Arthur as a human was drawing John Sims first, so I didn't make him look like John Sims. I will show you the first sketches for scientific purposes only, but know that I'm sorry. Could you tell that I left out a brief Twilight phase? Jasper-looking ass. I had read somewhere, Harlan at one point said that if Arthur were an animal, he would have been a rabbit, and for some reason I latched onto that idea more than any other physical descriptor. It was because of Usagi. So when I finally did end up giving him a unique face, well, knowing what I know now, it's way too soft. For one thing. Keep in mind, though, that by the time I got around to figuring out his face, it was Season 2, and I was coping poorly. So I'd say Soft Arthur served his purpose. Now that we've got all that out of the way, this is Arthur. This is Arthur's voice in his head. John. This is Arthur's hand. This is now John's hand. The first thing John will do with this hand is commit a murder. A second murder. But actually, a third murder. John, leave some murder for the rest of us. Editing Monkey here, I recently re-listened to the first episode of Malevolent just as a refresher before the travesty that was 56. And the amount of times that Arthur walks into a room during episode 1 only to find a dismembered, mangled corpse that was inevitably John's fault before he was attached to Arthur. Only for John to say something like, "I don't know, Arthur. I have no idea where this corpse came from. Seems to have been dismembered by a being beyond our comprehension. Maybe we should stop it." When he knows damn well he was the one who did it. Is so stupid. He's so stupid. Obviously, after that little endeavor, they are not keen on staying together because Arthur doesn't like murder, and John really wants to murder. The next couple episodes feel like God testing the waters with them. They get into a car crash, they get chased by a big monster, and they have to give a baby back to their mother. There's like a haunted house, and then a wraith, and then they're like a wheelchair, a wager. But their heartwarming first mutual murder will come in the form of a psychopath picking them up from the side of the road. Every woman's dream. A lot of the lore that they deal with in the earliest episodes of Season 1 is from Harlan's Call of Cthulhu campaign, which I have been watching to get good lore, and there will be a section for it at the end of this video, or maybe in another video. This video is long. Things about Roland, things about Anna, stuff that just generally happened in Arkham a little bit before Arthur was there. That's mostly what the campaign seems to be about so far. And from what I can tell, Kellen is the first deviation from that. I at least haven't heard any reference to him yet, but I'm also currently only on episode 4. I think Kellen's episode was the one where I really locked in. Not saying that the ones before that were lame or anything, but Kellen's episode definitely felt different, and it's also where we get our first major turning point. Up until this point, Arthur and John haven't really changed that much. They're both upset about the situation. Arthur is scruffy but okay, and John is just lively as ever. But before we know the Vanguard is the Vanguard, Arthur just kind of assumes that Kellen has the same thing going on that he has going on with him right now, where there's a voice in his head who's telling him to murder people, among other things. And so we have this interesting dynamic where Arthur is almost interacting with his future self. And I'm not saying that him and Kellen are even narrative foils in this way, but Arthur is definitely acting like it. It seems like he feels something for Kellen and is worried that if he doesn't get rid of John, he's going to be in the same boat as him. But he ends up in a different boat, that boat being a rickety old rowboat on a flaming lake that he's bleeding out in after running away from Kellen, who is now dead. And then it's John's turn for a little bit of existential characterization. Since Artie is not yet accustomed to being stabbed in the stomach region, it takes him a whole month to recover from this one, and that month was spent in a coma. This means John couldn't really do much of anything. He had no one to talk to, and he also presumably couldn't move the hand he now owns. That would be horrifying enough on its own for a human, but can you imagine if you're used to being an elder god with the power of everything at your fingertips, and then suddenly you are completely trapped and unable to do anything, and no one can hear you? Johnny's only human interaction during this time was with a nurse named Lily, and that name will unfortunately come back to haunt us. But it's also where he got the name John, because before this, Arthur had just been calling him friend. If you didn't know, John Doe is the international placeholder name, so that's what Lily was calling Arthur while he was in a coma, because they didn't know his name because he had a fake ID and was in a coma. John will go on to mention this several times later as part of the reason that he became interested in humanity, because he realized how fragile they were. And that fragility showed him something that he didn't have even as the King in Yellow. Meaning. This is one of the few times where John's design is actually impacted by the events of the podcast. I wanted John's design to evolve, but I didn't exactly know how to do it without undermining his status as a god, and as a non-physical being that exists purely in Arthur's head. But sometimes the most obvious choice is the best one. John's eyes, and therefore Arthur's eyes, were always going to be yellow. That was a given. But with his warming up to humanity and learning what it all means and becoming more human himself, I thought it would be neat if they go from that sort of bright, sickly yellow that the King in Yellow is known for to a more golden. So the idea is, by the end of the series, Arthur would go from having bright yellow Cullen eyes to having almost normal golden amber human eyes. And this moment where he receives his name and starts reflecting a bit on the nature of humanity, I thought would be the perfect place for his eyes to get just a bit more golden. As for Arthur, this is where it begins. I decided ingeniously that after a single month in a coma, Arthur's hair would be a little bit shaggy. Just for fun, you know? No harm done. Nothing wrong with that. Until it got out of control. It's bonkers to think that this entire series has elapsed over a period of maybe about 4 months, and in that time, Arthur's hair has grown out past his shoulders twice. Helpfully, Harlan only ever mentioning that he shaves and not cuts his hair feeds my delusions immensely. Anyway, after waking, shaving, having a heart-to-heart, and getting chased by a monster, they find themselves in the middle of a lake on yet another boat, but this time they're going to a creepy-ass misty lighthouse. Why? I don't even know. I couldn't hear the plot points over their 3rd and 4th and 5th and worst divorce. And now suddenly Johnny doesn't want to murder people. What is this guy's deal? Arthur, I may have murdered a young girl, your partner, and your building's maintenance man in front of you, but I draw the line at immortal cultists who are chasing us through a dark and spooky tunnel under a haunted graveyard lighthouse. Johnny sure can dish it out, but he really can't take it. We're gonna discover that real quick. They decide to work together again when Johnny comes to his senses and realizes that he would probably rather fall into the hands of whatever god is chasing them right now than deal with the cops for a second longer. This theory is swiftly proven correct, as Arthur's first on-screen real-life death is caused only partially by the madness of an elder god, and is mostly caused by an officer of the law unloading a mag into someone who is unarmed. Luckily, they have an ally in the form of a wraith that they freed before stopping by Kellen's. But we're not done with this boat yet, because it appears Cthulhu, or something Cthulhu adjacent, is very interested in them, but still doesn't do more damage than the cops just did. 3 bullet wounds from the cops, and scared and wet from the giant monster lurking under the harbor. Pretty solid deal, I think. He could have gotten ripped in half. Don't you worry, folks. That one's for later. They take a nap on the beach, find the Vanguard, and after a chipper conversation about believing the worst is behind them, they break into a dilapidated hotel, guzzle some cold soup for courage, fight off a ton of rats, a giant spider, a couple of cultists, fall down an elevator shaft, and end up in a spooky sunken city with non-Euclidean geometry. But the geometry is not the only feature of this city, because Arthur is quickly almost Jane Prenticed and is stabbed again. Same place, by an Innsmouth fishman. And finally, we've reached the place that they've been inadvertently going to this entire time. If you weren't already aware, it was supposed to be a pretty big reveal that John was part of the King in Yellow, but that was one of the first things I got spoiled for me, and it didn't ruin the experience, but it definitely made everything a lot less mysterious, and even more hilarious, because absolutely ridiculous shit has been happening around them this entire time, and they question it, but not enough. The first season will have you believe that Shub-Niggurath is going to be their number one problem. That and Antoine. But Antoine doesn't come up until the 5th season. And all of that happens after Shub-Niggurath gets herself erased from existence. But I was under the impression that they were at least somewhat convinced that all of the things they've been dealing with, like the madness and people going nuts around them and randomly trying to hurt them, and the music they keep hearing and all of the visions they keep getting, has to do with Shub-Niggurath and her cultists. But it's actually just been another dude entirely. But even though I was spoiled for it, I still thought it was a pretty good twist, because it came off exactly like what an investigative mind like Arthur's would think in this situation, going off of evidence that just happens to be closest to him and therefore happens to correlate somewhat more than just some random out-of-the-blue deity they read in one book. It was a really ingenious way to build up context for the later seasons, but also keep Arthur occupied enough that he didn't figure out the real truth faster, which successfully portrayed him as a very competent character who just happened to miss the mark because it was so far out of left field. Anyway, Art and John have been successfully lured to a creepy cultist get-together where they are going to put the King in Yellow back together again. This will unfortunately result in Arthur dying for real this time, but who cares about Arthur? I mean, the guy's a total screw-up. We've been getting slight glimpses of his tragic backstory so far, but it seems like he's got things haunting him that predate this little touch with the supernatural. He doesn't seem to have any family either, so who would really miss him? The answer is apparently John, who was convinced for a moment to rejoin his better half, but then remembered this humanity thing, and remembered the person who showed him that humanity thing. Arthur and John being so entangled, his words not mine, that the king can't take them apart majorly pisses him off, and after a little too much out loud rationalizing from Arthur, he decides to take them to his domain where he can take them apart not just mentally, but physically. And that is where we leave off season 1.
He spoke to me, the king. He said you were entangled, that to separate us was too difficult, that you lost your way. He's correct. He also said he'd kill me and reclaim you. Let him try.
Like I said before, the amount of actual art and design work I did during the watching of this season was not great because I watched the whole thing in about 3 days. But I don't regret it because I was able to get the one major cringe design out of my system and then coast on to season 2 where little did I know I was about to be fed a lot of motivation to draw. And draw I did, but you'll be alarmed to know that I finished season 2 at an even faster speed than I did season 1. Something about this podcast throttled me by the throat, and it recently has again. I have not been calm home for the last 4 days. I sound calm and put together on camera, at least I hope I do, but trust that my persona is not a monkey for no reason, which is one of the most unsurprising statements you've ever heard if you've understood any of my Ultra Kill references. For me, the hardest part about creation isn't a lack of inspiration, it's a constant cycle of change that my brain goes through every other second, which is probably why the story of Malevolent appeals to me so much, because it feels like a D&D campaign. If I stop moving, I die, so I rarely don't have any inspiration for anything, which I already know saying that out loud as an artist is a huge privilege. But it's like falling down a flight of really slippery stairs. Once you get started, you can't exactly stop, and that makes it hard to make things with even your current most vision in mind, because the next day it's going to evolve, and then you're going to be overwhelmed and try and update it, and it's not gonna work. And dealing with one of those, maybe, but I don't have just one fixation. What am I, an amateur? The primate in my brain looks at all the things that we're thinking about and goes, yeah, we can make 6 videos in 1 month. By the way, when you get a little bit of free time, why don't we start storyboarding those other 6 animatics you've got going on and start working on animating the entire Epic the Musical to your D&D OCs, AU? And I was only medicated for 2 days in 2009, so of course I go, hell yeah, brother, let's do it! And even though I couldn't be more happy that this is the way my brain works, that constant fast-paced evolution of thought still used to really stress me out, not because of what I preferred my stories to be, but because what I thought a story was supposed to be. Or at least I thought so, until I found this absolute madman making the most beautiful masterpiece that's ever hit my ears out of 10-year-old D&D lore and Patreon votes. All by himself. He voice acts every single character. He does all the music. He writes it, he edits it. The singular thing he doesn't do is the art, and he's changing that for Tales of the Dark World. The thought that this incredible story was built on the back of spontaneity from one person fills me with an inconceivable amount of joy, and it changed my perspective on what I thought was possible. Right in the middle of editing this, he released another trailer for 9 to Midnight. Dude, you have 3 fantastic ongoing stories and just finished a 4th. I don't care if it's an annual thing. How do you even have the energy for this? What are you made of? I'm just saying. Raising 2 young children and being half of the 2 nicest people on planet Earth, and trying to get through the intricate lore of the Magnus Archives at the same time, all while you're doing this? I don't want this to come off like I'm idolizing Harlan, because at the end of the day, he's a person just like us, and I would never want to undermine that, or make him feel uncomfortable in any way. And I also understand there's a lot behind the scenes that we don't see. Believe me, oh my god, this video, just this video, not even that complicated, it tested me spiritually. I only mean to say that when I was a child, having multiple stories you were the sole creator, producer, writer, and voice actor for, and having a loving nuclear family you could sport with those stories, was something called delusions of grandeur. So I do find him quite inspirational. So thank you, Harlan. And thank you, Joe. And thank you, Henry, for lending your vocal talents to Deviser. Don't think I didn't notice that. It was awesome. Thank you to my family and friends for supporting me and listening to my incessant malevolent yapping. I would say it's Charlie's fault, but it's more like a violently rotating carousel of whoever I like at the moment. And last but absolutely not least, thank you so much to you, the viewer. Recently we got to 3,500 subscribers, and it's starting to look more like 4,000. That is amazing. Social media at large has made big numbers seem really, really small, but the fact that 50,000 of you have watched my animatic tutorial is bonkers. And getting that many subscribers and so many kind comments under a video where I actually talked has been a pretty good confidence boost. If you like this video and want to see more like it, I will be releasing season 2 next month and every other season after that. You know how this works. If you still haven't listened to Malevolent or just need a refresher, you can check out their website at malevolent.ca and the Invictus Stream Patreon. And if you've listened to Malevolent but nothing else from Harlan Guthrie, I highly recommend Deviser. And even if you've read the content warnings for Malevolent, you should read the Deviser ones better, because I didn't. Haven't listened to Tales of the Dark World or Dice Shame yet, but I would be shocked to learn that they're not also good. And that about does it. Have a happy Halloween, a blessed Samhain, and to my fellow Malevolent fans,
Alan, we are so fucked.
Someone
Some fucking shit
with
up.
the name Raffadil, which is a great name, said, I will eat pizza voluntarily, but I don't think I've ever consciously wanted to eat pizza, and I've never disagreed with a human being more in my entire
Sorry,
life.
wait. What?